Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Have you ever thought about what truly drives a person to embrace the path of darkness? What if evil is not born, but shaped by pain, loss, and ambition? In today's video, you will uncover the tragic and chilling story of the boy who became Lord Voldemort. Tom Riddle, also known as the Dark Lord, he who must not be named, the very embodiment of terror in the wizarding world. He is the villain we all know, a ruthless sorcerer who stops at nothing to achieve his goals. But he wasn't always like this. Once, he was just a boy, one who learned, dreamed, and even had friends. At what point did he transform into the feared Dark Lord? Did the darkness take root in his childhood, or was it a decision he made as an adult? And what was the turning point that led him down this path? Let's unravel the mystery. Wrap yourself in your invisibility cloak, and let's begin. The origins of Tom Riddle. Tom was born into a broken family. His mother, Merope Gaunt, was a pure-blood witch, a direct descendant of Salazar Slytherin. His father, Tom Riddle Sr., was an ordinary muggle, but their love was built on deception. Merope used a love potion to make Tom Sr. fall for her. When she stopped using it, he abandoned her, leaving her pregnant and alone. Weak and destitute, Merope gave birth to her son in a muggle orphanage, where she died shortly after. And so from the very beginning, Tom Riddle's life was marked by loss, abandonment, and a deep sense of resentment. A troubled childhood. Growing up in the orphanage, Tom was different. Strange things happened around him. Objects moved, animals obeyed his silent commands, and those who crossed him suffered misfortunes. He didn't just have magic, he had control over it, long before he knew what it was. When Albus Dumbledore came to take him to Hogwarts at age 11, the young boy was not surprised. He already knew he was special, he just needed someone to confirm it. The Hogwarts years, a brilliant mind with a dark curiosity. Sorted into Slytherin, Tom quickly became the most gifted student of his generation. His intelligence, charm, and ambition won him followers, students who admired his power and his ability to manipulate others. But Hogwarts also gave him answers about his past. He discovered his connection to Salazar Slytherin and the existence of the Chamber of Secrets. He learned about Horcruxes, the forbidden magic that could grant him immortality, and in his 5th year he committed his first murder, using the basilisk to kill Myrtle Warren, later known as Moaning Myrtle. By the time he left Hogwarts, Tom Riddle was no longer just a promising student. He had already begun his descent into darkness. The birth of Voldemort. After graduation, Tom sought a position at Hogwarts, but Dumbledore refused him. Rejected, he vanished from the public eye, traveling the world in search of the darkest magic. He delved into forbidden knowledge, seeking ways to cheat death. When he returned, he was no longer Tom Riddle. He had transformed body, mind, and soul into Lord Voldemort. He gathered followers, the Death Eaters, and unleashed terror upon the wizarding world. The war had begun. What truly drove him to evil? Was Voldemort born a monster, or was he made into one? A combination of factors shaped his descent into darkness. Orphanhood and abandonment. He was never loved, never wanted. The pain of rejection festered within him. Pride and lineage. Learning he was the heir of Slytherin fueled his superiority complex. Unmatched ambition. He didn't just want power, he wanted to be the greatest sorcerer who ever lived. Resentment and rage. He despised his muggle father for abandoning him and his mother for being weak. These forces twisted him into the Dark Lord we know. But the question remains, was there ever a moment when he could have chosen differently? Or was his fate sealed from the very start? The rise of Lord Voldemort was not an instant transformation. It was a slow descent, a path shaped by choices, betrayals, and an unrelenting desire for power. After leaving Hogwarts, Tom Riddle knew he needed more than just knowledge. He needed influence, followers, and above all, immortality. He had spent years studying the darkest branches of magic, but now it was time to put his theories into practice. His first steps were calculated. He worked at Borgin and Burke's, a shop specializing in rare and often dangerous magical artifacts. On the surface, he was merely a young man with a fascination for history, but in truth, he was searching for objects of power, relics that could serve as vessels for his Horcruxes. It was during this time that he came across two items that would become part of his legend: the locket of Salazar Slytherin and the cup of Helga Hufflepuff. But these were not gifts. He took them by force, murdering their owners without hesitation. Something changed in him with each act of violence. The first time he killed, he hesitated. The second time, it was easier. By the third, there was no hesitation at all. Splitting his soul was not just a means of survival, it was a sacrifice, an offering to his own ambition. He had convinced himself that emotions were weaknesses, that love was a lie, that compassion was a flaw. He needed to cut away the last remnants of Tom Riddle and fully become Lord Voldemort. His travels led him to the darkest corners of the world. In Albania, he sought the ruins of an ancient sorcerer's fortress, rumored to be a place of untold power. There he experimented with magic so dark that even the most feared wizards of history had avoided it. He learned to manipulate shadows, to extract life from his victims, to use fear as a weapon. By the time he returned to Britain, he was no longer just a man, he was something more, something unnatural. His followers came to him willingly. Some were drawn by his charisma, others by the promise of power. He did not demand loyalty, he inspired it. Those who followed him believed they were part of something greater, a movement that would reshape the wizarding world. They were young, ambitious, and blind to what he truly was. He called them the Death Eaters, and together they began their campaign of terror. One by one, obstacles were removed, ministry officials disappeared, aurors who dared to oppose him were found dead. The wizarding world lived in fear, but no one knew just how deep his influence ran. He had spies within Hogwarts, within the ministry, even within families that claimed to be neutral. There was nowhere safe. But Voldemort was not satisfied with mere power. He wanted something greater. He wanted to transcend death itself. He had already created multiple Horcruxes, each one anchoring his soul to the world, but he feared it was not enough. There were still risks, still vulnerabilities. He needed something stronger, something ancient. His research led him to a name whispered in the darkest texts, the Deathly Hallows. If the legends were true, the master of the Hallows would be the master of death itself. He pursued them relentlessly. He sought the Elder Wand, believing it to be the key to ultimate power. But despite all his efforts, the wand eluded him. He traced its path through history, following the trail of its many masters, but by the time he reached it, it had already passed to another. He raged at his failure, but he was patient. He could wait. He could manipulate. He would take it when the time was right. His war against the wizarding world reached its peak when he learned of a prophecy. A child born at the end of July, a boy destined to challenge him. He could not allow such a threat to exist. With cold calculation, he sought out the child, believing that by eliminating him, he would secure his immortality. But in his arrogance, he overlooked one simple truth. Prophecies are not always what they seem. The night he entered Godric's Hollow was meant to be the night of his greatest victory. He had killed before, without hesitation, without regret. this would be no different. He cast the killing curse without a second thought, expecting the child to vanish into nothingness. Instead, everything changed. The curse rebounded. He felt his soul being torn apart, his body disintegrating, his very essence unraveling. He had faced death so many times and always emerged stronger, but this was different. This was not just defeat, this was destruction. He had underestimated the power he had always dismissed. Love, a mother's love, a protection he had never known, a force he had refused to believe in. And yet, it was this love that destroyed him. But he did not die. His Horcruxes anchored him to life, preventing him from passing into the void. He became a shadow, a whisper, a fragment of a soul, too broken to hold form. He fled to the only place he could, the forests of Albania, where he lingered, weak and formless, waiting for the chance to return. For years he was nothing, a parasite, latching on to whatever life he could find. He possessed creatures, lived through them, but it was never enough. He needed a body, he needed a servant, and when the moment came, he seized it. Quirinus Quirrell was weak, a man full of doubt and fear, the perfect host for a broken soul. Voldemort manipulated him, twisted him, turned him into a vessel, but this form was temporary. He needed more. He needed his full power restored. His return was inevitable. The world had forgotten to fear him, but he had never stopped planning. He had never stopped waiting. And when he rose again, stronger than ever, it was with a vengeance. He had lost everything once. He would not make the same mistakes again. He would not underestimate love, but he would find a way to break it. He would not rely on Horcruxes alone, but would seek even greater power. The war would not just be about domination. It would be about erasing all who stood in his way. He had waited too long for anything less than absolute victory. But fate had other plans. The boy he had failed to kill once would stand against him again, and this time the battle would decide the future of the wizarding world. The story of Lord Voldemort was never just about one man's quest for power. It was a tragedy, a tale of a boy who could have chosen a different path, but instead let his fears and